This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. Welcome back to another episode of the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 162. In this episode, I'm jumping back into helping you start your podcast. There's been so many of you DMing me, messaging me, even though I've done countless episodes on this. I wanted to structure this one a little differently about starting your podcast. Like, where do you start? What's the framework that's going to get you to where you need to go in the fastest amount of time, and also build the audience and give you the skills you need to improve as a host? So we're going to dive into that right now. So I want to help you refine your approach. And in this episode, I've packed it with tips and strategies to help you get off the ground and build a strong and engaging audience. And I know that all sounds amazing, but honestly, where do you begin? One of the first things you need is a great idea. A podcast is about ideas. It's an idea that resonates with your target audience. It sets the stage for you to talk about everything under the sun that you are passionate about or your niche, and that feeds that audience. And that will set the stage for everything that follows. So number one, find your niche. Start by identifying what you're passionate about. Think about all the topics that you could talk about endlessly. You don't want something that's going to cause you to have to work really, really hard to be able to speak about it. It should be something that you're excited about, you know enough about, that you can share in that conversation, share in building that community. And it doesn't mean you have to know it all. It just means that this particular niche and topic that you're going to be talking about is something that drives your passion and you're open to learn more. And that's the best mix right there. So I want you to think about it. Is there a particular niche or subject matter that excites you? Your enthusiasm will be infectious and will help attract listeners who share the same interest as you. Number two, brainstorming ideas. Once you've pinpointed your passion, start to brainstorm podcasting ideas that align with it. Consider formats like interviews, solo commentary, storytelling, and panel discussions. I personally do a lot of solo episodes, but I also am part of other podcasts where we have co-hosts. And I really do love doing podcasts with co-hosts because we share energies, we have a back and forth conversation, and we can kind of do a little bit of everything. We can do the storytelling, we could do the commentary, we can do the interviews, and it's really nice. But sometimes it's just easier to be solo, especially when you're starting out. Unless you're starting this journey with someone who's just as excited as you are, then yes, get a co-host, and together you guys are going to team up and you're going to tackle the podcasting world together. Number three, research and validation. Research existing podcasts in your chosen niche. Find out all the things they're talking about. What are they doing? How are they marketing it? What kind of guests are they bringing on? What's the audience look like? Do they have groups attached to this? Look at what they're doing. And then I always like to say, look at what they're not doing. Okay, because you don't want to be a copycat. You want to be a repeat. But you also don't want to be intimidated and say, well, they're already doing it, so why would I do it because they're doing it? You got to look at what you can do differently. There's probably an area that they're not reaching, even though they have this great community in the same niche, but maybe they're at a high level, maybe they're mid-level, maybe they're low level. Who are they speaking to? Like my podcast, the Podcast in the Rough, I'm speaking to anyone who wants to start a podcast. That's my base level. That's where I'm at. Anybody who wants to start a podcast, whether you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or just someone who's trying to do this as a hobby and have fun, that's who I'm speaking to. And then as I get you to where you need to be and you start growing, I can scale you all the way up to the top. I'm with you along the entire process, the entire journey. If you look at my episodes talk about how to start and launch a podcast with success. And it takes you from the process of all these episodes of microphones and technical stuff and all the different success secrets that I have. And when that becomes not enough for those listeners, that's when they jump into my groups. That's when they jump into my mastermind. And so I can continuously talk about podcasting because it's endless and there's so many exciting things that I can talk about and geek out over. So remember, research and validation. Find out who else is doing a podcast in your niche, find out what they're missing, and then find out what you can do differently. This can help you carve out a unique angle. You want to offer something that adds value and stands out from the crowd. Don't worry about if you're talking about the same thing as other podcasters. Just do it different or do it better. Now let's talk about the style of podcast that you should start with. For those just getting their feet wet, I recommend starting with a solo or co-hosted podcast. And here's why. When you're a solo podcast, it's a great way to develop your voice and style without needing to coordinate with others. You get to run the whole show. Plus, It's a fantastic way to establish yourself as an expert in your field. And when it comes to co-hosting podcasts, this is a great way to have a partner. It can help you with consistency and provide different perspectives. Plus, it's less intimidating to bounce ideas off of someone else who is working with you on the same podcast. Now it doesn't feel overwhelming. You got a little team. You guys can do this together. Both of these styles allow you to grow your skills in podcasting, such as speaking, editing, and content creation. Number 4, setting up your podcast. Now let's get into the technical side of things. I recommend starting with podcasters.spotify.com. It used to be called Anchor, and I actually started my podcast using my cell phone because back then I had a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about. I just didn't have the equipment. I didn't have the funding, and I wasn't that committed. So I was like, let me just dabble a little bit here. And it turned into this amazing show that's now on its 5th season. And why I recommend podcasters.spotify.com is because it's free. It's a user-friendly platform that allows you to create, distribute, and analyze your podcast very easily. So here are the steps to get that set up. Number 1, go to podcasters.spotify.com and create an account. By the way, I just want to add this is not sponsored by them at all. I just highly recommend them, and I love that it's so easy to set up. In fact, not only have I set up my podcast and built this out, I've done this for several others that have now been able to grow their podcast. They have a really great time doing it. And I've even included this same setup for my daughter who's set up a podcast, and she's able to do it. So if my 11-year-old can set up her podcast and run her show, I know you got this. So create an account by signing up for podcasters.spotify.com and follow the prompts to set up your podcast. Super easy, and it's streamlined. Number 2, then you just got to record your first episode. Now remember, I started on a phone. You could do that, but I highly recommend just using a good quality microphone and some recording software. If you're unsure where to start, simple setups can be effective. Number 3, edit your content. Use editing software to polish each episode. Remove any mistakes, long pauses to keep your content engaging. It's something that I spend the most time on. And yes, it's work. It's not that exciting. But when you listen to the final polished episode, that's where the gold is. That's where the magic happens. That's where you're like, I can do this. I just did a professional show. And what's nice about editing is you can find free software like Audacity, and the software will help eliminate a lot of things. Like when I go to edit my podcast, I make sure I remove as much background as I can without making it sound like I'm in a tin can, okay? Because if it eliminates too much noise, you're gonna sound like a tin can. Now, I go into detail about this in earlier episodes, but for right now, I just wanna say that when you edit your podcast episode, take the time to cut out things like mouth pops, clicks and cracks, background noises, pauses between words. Things like this, just kind of tighten it up, clean up that episode. Will sound really, really good when you publish it. And you'll be grateful that you took the time to do that. Number 4, publish and distribute. Once your episodes are ready, publish them on podcasters.spotify.com. From there, you can distribute your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other platforms. It is so easy to do. And again, this is free. Okay, now let's move into building your audience and gaining traction. Here's a quick framework that I've put together to help you get started on this path. Number 1, create quality content. Consistency is key. Make sure your content is valuable, engaging, and relevant to your audience. You want to entertain and educate at all times with quality. Number 2, promote your podcast. Leverage your social media accounts to share your episodes. Engage with your audience through those posts, stories, and even live Q&As. I mean, just have fun with this. Don't worry about the algorithm. Don't worry about how many views your reels are getting on Instagram. Don't worry about how many people are showing up on your YouTube live stream or your TikTok or your Instagram or Facebook. Just have fun with it and stay consistent. You will start to build traction, regardless of all these other things that may or may not affect your reach. Number 3, encourage reviews and ratings. I can't stress that enough. Ask your listeners to leave reviews and ratings on your podcast directories. Positive reviews can significantly increase your podcast availability and visibility. And with that being said, I would love it if you would go to thepodcastintherough.com and leave a review on whatever platform or directory that you see fit that works for you. Would be amazing. Preferably, I would love to have a rating and review on Apple Podcast. Because if I can get more of those on there, that's where a majority of my audience is. So that would be great to be able to reach more people and know that they can trust this podcast and the value that it brings. Number 4, use YouTube for extra reach. YouTube has always been the backbone to almost everything that I've indulged in on social media. Everything that I've built, my companies, all different ones, I always start with a YouTube because it has incredible audience and the ability to network people is endless on YouTube. Yes, there is an algorithm there. Yes, it can be challenging, but it's still a really good place to start. So simply just create a YouTube channel for your podcast, upload your episodes with eye-catching visuals. Don't forget to make sure you take time for that thumbnail. The thumbnail is going to be the thing that really grabs the attention. It's important. Even though I know they have autoplay videos now, that thumbnail needs to be just right. So spend some time on that. This is a great way to reach a broader audience and tap into YouTube's massive platform. Again, if you're engaging in the comments, you're encouraging people to subscribe, turn the bell notification on. If you're posting consistently using the YouTube videos, the YouTube shorts, all of that is going to really boost your podcast visibility and gain you listeners and subscribers. Number 5, collaborate with other podcasters. This is extremely exciting, and you can start this even if you've only got one episode recorded. Maybe you don't even have any. You can still reach out and say, hey, I haven't recorded my first podcast episode. I'd love to kind of learn a little bit. Can I be a guest on your show? Can I partner with you and I could be your co-host? Show me the ropes. Someone's going to take you under the wing and show you the ropes, and you're going to see how fun podcasting can be. So don't be shy to reach out to other podcasters for guest appearances or cross promotions. And again, this is a great way to tap into their audience and gain new listeners for you. And now you've directed some of their following into your podcast and you're sharing subscribers now. And now I want to give you just a little bit more value with podcasting, because no matter where you're at with your podcast journey, maybe you've been doing this for a long time and maybe you hit a plateau, or maybe you haven't even started and you're like, this is overwhelming. Where do I begin? I highly recommend you checking out my Buy Me a Coffee platform because I have a great opportunity for you. Right now, I'm running a special on my podcast, Mastermind, and I'm giving away amazing content information and helping you podcast from start to success inside my mastermind. And I've made it extremely affordable at the time of this recording. And all you got to do is go to buymeacoffee.com/intherough and you'll learn all about it. And you can support this podcast as well. If you'd like to learn more about what the mastermind can do for you, you can also go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. And there's plenty of information and resources there. My goal is to help as many people start and launch a podcast from start to success and maybe make a little extra income to take a vacation. Maybe they're a business owner and they need to market because they don't have a marketing budget. And this is a great way to market your business, your products and services without being too pitchy. And it gives you long form media to talk about all of that stuff that surrounds your business. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're launching some new exciting businesses and endeavors. Again, podcasting is where it needs to be. You need to start there because we want to be a part of your journey, that hero's journey from the start where there's no money and it's grind, all the way through the triumphs and victories. We want to be a part of that. We want to be your founding members, and there's people that want to be your founding members. So podcasting is here to help you capture the moment every step of the way. It's the journey. And maybe you want to be one of the top best podcasters out there. Well, I want to be a part of that. I would love to contribute to your success as being one of the best podcasters out there. And the best way to get started is right here inside my Podcast Success Secrets Mastermind. And again, I'm offering it at a very affordable price right now at the time of this recording. And you can always ask me questions under the YouTube videos, under each podcast episodes. I check those regularly. You might even catch me doing a whole podcast episode just based on your question. So I'm here to help, and I look forward to seeing you jump on a platform and start launching your podcast. That is a wrap for today's episode on starting your podcast and building your audience. I hope you find these tips helpful and are feeling inspired to start your own podcast journey. Just remember, every great podcast starts with a single episode. So don't hesitate to get out there and start creating your podcast episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a rating and review. It would greatly help me reach more people. Heck, even send this episode to a friend right now. That'd be awesome. I appreciate all the support. I look forward to talking to you in the next episode of the Podcast on the Rough. For more podcasting tips and resources, visit thepodcastontherough.com. This is the Podcast in the Rough.